I'm joined once again today by Phyllis Schlafly, who is an American constitutional lawyer, conservative activist, author, founder of the Eagle Forum. Ms. Schlafly, it's been a little while since we had you on the program. The topic today is President Obama's message about religious violence at the annual prayer breakfast, where he said that Christians also have a history of violence. You wrote a piece, the Eagle Forum put out a piece saying that this was an insult to Christians. Let's start there. What was so insulting about his comments?
Well, what he did was to try to compare what happened at the Crusades 1,000 years ago, and the Inquisition, which was at least 500 years ago, long since forgotten and not an issue anymore. And he tried to say that Christians are just as violent as Islam, and that, of course, is not true at all. It was insulting to Christians.
And how do we establish what is insulting? In other words, what is the amount of time back in history where violence took place, at which point you're comfortable saying it's no longer relevant today? Is it 100 years? Is it 200? Is it 500?
Well, I think the whole thing of comparing it to the Crusades is ridiculous. Actually, the Crusades were defensive. They were trying to take back lands that the Muslims had stolen from the Christians. And that's what the purpose of the Crusades was. And it's just, he just reached too far back and too far to try to offend and equate Christians with Muslims. And there's no way this can be equated with their current beheading of little girls, that sort of thing.
So I'm hearing your I want to make sure I understand your position. So your position is that it was an insulting comparison, not only because of how long ago the instances he referenced took place, but at least with regard to the Crusades, because you believe the Crusades to have been defensive rather than proactive acts of terror.
Yes, both of those arguments.
Okay, so is it fair to say then that if we had more recent instances of Christian terror that were not defensive, that the equation or the comparison to Islamic violence might be more apt in your mind? Is that fair?
Well, I don't think there's any way to compare Christians with Islam brutality and terrorism. It's just so far-fetched. It's just an attempt to reach out and insult Christians and to make sure that Christians are no better than anybody else. And Christianity is the religion of most of our people in this country, and I think he should have kept his mouth shut.
So that's interesting. You said that it was an attempt to try to show that Christians are no better than anybody else.
Right.
Is your belief?
He objects to the whole idea
Yeah.
of American superiority and that America is better than any place else.
Well, but hold on a second, Ms. Schlafly. Hold on a second.
So that's why everybody in the world wants to come here.
Well, that's not true. According to polls, actually, there's a very small percentage of people around the world who actually want to come to the U.S. That's a myth, Ms. Schlafly. But let me focus back on what you said. First, you said Christians not being better than anybody else, but then you said Americans not being better. Do you equate Americans to Christians?
No, but I think there are two thoughts of Obama. I think he does not want to think that America is superior in any way, and that translates into our whole effort to maintain military superiority, which I believe we should have. Not just be strong, but be superior, because that way our friends will rely on us and our enemies will respect us.
Okay, so now we're really getting into the meat of this. Do you believe that Christians are better than everybody else?
Well, yes, I do.
You do? And
Sure
why
do.
why is that?
Well, I think what Christians have done for the world is very wonderful. Who else is good to people, established the rule of law, set up all these hospitals to care for people who are ill? Christians have done wonderful things.
Well, I mean, that's I have to say, a very quaint understanding of Christianity's role. It is very interesting to me. Let's talk a little bit, if we can, just to contextualize and add some data. Recent acts of Christian violence, because you said Crusades, it was long ago. It's not really a great example. Exactly. So I looked, and just over the last few years, we've had the Wisconsin Sikh Temple massacre, the murder of Dr. George Tiller, who performed abortions, the Knoxville Unitarian Universalist Church shooting, the murder of Dr. John Britton, the Centennial Olympic Park bombing, the Planned Parenthood bombing in Brookline, Massachusetts, the suicide attack on the IRS building in Austin, Texas, the 2009 Holocaust Memorial Museum shooting, and I could go on and on. I don't want to take up our full time just listing these instances. Those are all in the last 5 to 7 years, and those were Christian acts of terror. Are those relevant to our understanding of violence and religion?
I don't think so, because those are all individual acts of criminals, and probably most or all of them were prosecuted under our laws or violations of our laws. And it's not the same as the mass terrorism, the mass murder that is carried out by Islam.
But you recognize, Ms. Schlafly, that in the United States, domestically, since 9/11, the majority of domestic terrorism in the United States has had, number one, almost nothing to do with Islam whatsoever, and number two, has been disproportionately connected to Christianity. That's over a period now of 14 years.
No, I don't recognize that, and I don't think that's true. You look at 9/11; that was a clear example of mass terrorism committed by our enemies, non-Christians.
No question about it. But what I'm saying is, in the 14 years since, while the focus has been on this so-called global war on terror, Peter King, congressman, holding hearings about dangerous American Muslims, the majority of domestic American terrorism has had nothing to do with Muslims. That's just data from the FBI. I don't know if you would dispute that data.
Well, there certainly Christians believe in original sin, and there are a lot of people who do commit crimes. No question about that. And we have laws against these crimes, and in most cases they are punished. And I honestly, I don't think that's relevant.
See, I'm finding a double standard in terms of what you include as relevant and what you exclude. And I'll kind of just sum it up. And then, of course, as I always do, I'll give you a chance to comment.
Well, I do think it's fine for Americans to be patriotic and think our country is best.
Well, but let's not conflate issues, Ms. Schlafly. Let me go back and kind of reframe the question to keep us focused. Initially, you said that President Obama's comments were not relevant in terms of the Crusades because it was a long time ago and you felt the Crusades were defensive. I then cited a dozen or more instances of recent Christian terrorism, and you wrote those off as merely individual acts not connected more broadly to Christianity. And then when I told you that if we'd look not at those anecdotal pieces of evidence, but at all of the data from September 12th, 2001 on, you said you just dispute the data. So I'm getting the sense that you've just made up your mind regardless of the facts.
Yes, I call that patriotism.
Oh, so patriotism is having a position that is not influenced by facts, you're saying?
No, that's not true. I think it's very influenced by fact that America is the best, the fairest, the most successful society in our country today, and I'm proud of it, and I think Obama should respect it and not try to compare us with some awful people of thousands of years ago.
All right, and you won't be influenced by FBI data or anything else. That's your position, and that's what you strongly feel.
I certainly won't be influenced by FBI data to think that the Americans are just as bad as the Muslims. That's correct.
All right. Well, we have heard it all. We've been speaking with Phyllis Schlafly, American constitutional lawyer, conservative activist, author, founder of the Eagle Forum. I can't thank you enough.
And I do believe that America is exceptional and the best. And I think our children should be taught that, and they should not be taught that somehow we're wrong and defective, because we're the best thing that the world has ever produced.
Well, there's no question at all that you do have people in this country who agree with you. Ms. Schlafly, a true pleasure as always. Thank you for joining me.
Okay, bye.